Hey, woman from the hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson. Now part of the VSiN family podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in segment number 2 by one of our good friends, Nate Hornung, better known as Shaggy Bets. We're going to chat with him about the fact that we've got the NCAA Tournament field expanding. That makes us both very, very sad. A little bit more happy that we're seeing a lot of players returning to school. We're going to chat with him about some teams that feels like they need to make a few moves here, and some of the teams looking at you, the bottom of the ACC, that have actually had a nice offseason. Then in the final segment, I'm going to get you guys a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. Additionally, in segment number 1, another big pickup for Duke, so I'm going to be looking at that. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUnit_81. Keep in mind, RCM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. Then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And for Duke, a very eventful day on Thursday. They ink an Amazon Prime deal. They're going to be playing 3 games on Prime. They somehow, someway have a mid-February game against Gonzaga. Not quite sure how that works, but they've got that. They're going to be playing in December against Michigan and against UConn. So Amazon Prime getting some Duke basketball, but they also got themselves a 5-star recruit. I would not be leading with the Amazon Prime deal because that is what it is. I mean, congratulations if you have Amazon Prime, but we're more concerned about being able to make money off of these teams. And for Duke, they bring in Joaquim Boumtje. Hopefully I got that correct. He is an international man of mystery. He was playing over for Barca Atletica, if I got that correct. I hope that I did, but a true 7-footer who's currently 16 years old. He's going to be turning 17 years old either during the season or towards the start of the season, but a 5-star recruit that is reclassifying to be able to play right now for this team. And for Duke, it's an absolutely locked and loaded class. Like right now, I do think that it's between Florida and Duke for who should be the preseason number 1. Now, we all know that not always a preseason number 1 team actually gets the job done, looking at Purdue last year, but I mean, it's just an embarrassment of riches for the team. Bringing back Patrick Ngongba, who was averaging 10 points, nearly 6 rebounds per game from a season ago. They bring back Caleb Foster. Dame Sarr is a versatile wing that's going to be able to help the team out. They're bringing in a bunch of 5-star guys like Darren Rippey is going to be able to give you a whole heck of a lot of something. You're bringing in a guy like a Cam Williams, who's a top 10 overall recruit. They bring in Drew Skronowski, who he's a guy that was solid over at Belmont, but it feels like that's just an insurance policy at this point because, I mean, the amount of guys that they've got. Caden Boozer is going to be back from a season ago. They didn't make a lot of ads via the transfer portal. They brought in Skronowski, who I mentioned before, but you bring in John Blackwell, 19-point-per-game guy over at Wisconsin. Yeah, this team is looking very locked and loaded. So for Duke, they've done a great job this offseason, even though they're not utilizing a ton of the transfer portal. I didn't even mention the fact that they've got Bryson Howard, who's going to be another versatile wing for them. He stands right around about 6'4", so a little bit undersized at the wing spot, but man, it's a locked and loaded Duke team. Now, we've seen locked and loaded Duke teams looking at the Zion Williamson team, looking at the Cooper Flagg team that have not gotten it done, so it doesn't mean that a national title is foregone or anything like that. I mean, I talked about Florida, the fact that they pretty much have everything except for a guy in Olivier Rioux, who I hope I got that name correct because he's a man that comes over from the country of Canada, but I mean, that said, the 7'9" big man, by the way, I should be pointing this out, I'll lead with this as well. The fact that he signs with UC Irvine, Zod for the Anteaters, a team that always looks to dominate on the boards. They always look for good low post play. Now you add in there the tallest player in NCAA history in Olivier Rioux. That is absolutely tremendous for them, so I ain't good on them, but I mean, those two teams are going to be top to bottom loaded. You've got a good Houston team that I love what they've been able to do here in the offseason. I think that adding De'Don Thomas is going to be able to get them right back to being a top 10 team. Michigan is obviously reloaded. I don't know if they can quite be a top 2 team, but they're certainly going to be a top 5 team when the season starts up. They're one of the best coach teams in all of college basketball. List goes on and on. So you've got a lot of teams that were good last year that it looks like are going to be amazing once again. We'll talk about that with our good friend Nate Hornung. We're going to be talking about NCAA tournament expansion, teams that need to get going in the transfer portal. Yes, I'm looking at you, LSU, and so much more right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now a part of the VSiN family podcast. inside edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back to lovely Las Vegas for Guts Go Soups with myself, Greg Peters, and now part of the VSiN family podcast. It's always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Nate Hornung aboard. You know him a little bit better as Shaggy Bets, as he does so much great work over at Your Betting News, whether that be live shows, whether that be his written work. He does a great job following soccer, college basketball, so many different sports, football, you name it. He does it. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at Shaggy_Bets all together. And Nate, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Hey, happy to be here, Greg. Thanks for having me on. Let's talk some hoops.
Absolutely, and it's unfortunate that we have to talk about this first things first, but what was your reaction when we found out a few days ago that it looks like we are going to get 76 teams in the NCAA tournament? Because as much as I wanted to feel sad and upset about it, I knew it was coming. Still sad and upset about it, but man, feels like a big-time cash grab.
Yo, absolutely. I mean, you said it. The general public obviously hates this decision. Everything I've seen online is everybody is against it, and I'm right there with you. I'm completely against it, but you said it. It was kind of inevitable. They've been talking about extending it for, at least a couple of years now. It was just a matter of time before it happens. But my biggest issue is, you're not opening up the tournament for some of those mid-major, low-major schools that probably deserve to be there. What's going to end up happening is you're going to get the sub 500 Power 5 teams. We're going to see the SEC maybe getting all their teams from the conference into the NCAA tournament nowadays. So I'm against it. I really don't like that also the 16 seeds are going to have to all play in nowadays. I'm under the impression that if you win your conference tournament, you automatically qualify for the round of 64. That is just not the case anymore. And, extending it to 76 teams, it just feels like we're handing out more participation trophies for teams that are just not national championship contenders. So I'm upset about it, but again, nothing we can do now. We just got to move forward.
Yep, we do have to move forward. It's very unfortunate that we do have to move forward, but so well said by you, and we will move forward. We will not talk about that anymore because that is sad. What's a little bit happier is that we've got so much talent returning to college basketball. Only 71 players declared for the NBA draft, lowest since 2003 in terms of the underclassmen, and I'm not sure how you look at this, but I do think that with so many of the guys that return, many of them did return to top 10 teams like UConn, like Michigan, like Florida. You go down the list, Arizona retained Montevis Krivas, and I think a lot of the teams that were in the Final Four, Elite Eight, Top 10 last year, they're going to be right back there this year.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, today's era, NIL, this is what we get, right? You saw two of the biggest names in the draft, Braylon Mullins at UConn and Thomas Houck of Florida, both potential lottery picks, opting to stay in school for another year and return to college hoops, which, I'm excited about because I like watching those guys at the collegiate level. But again, they're making so much money now playing college basketball. It's, why not stick around for another year or two? So it's just the nature of where we are right now in this NIL era of college basketball. But again, you are going to see guys returning, and I'm right there with you. I think some of those big name teams are going to be reloaded and ready to go for another title run. So we might just see the top of college basketball getting much, much stronger and really extending that gap between the national championship contenders and everybody else. There's pros and cons to it. I like that the players are obviously making money because they deserve to. It is good at least that some of these guys are staying in college hoops for an extra year or two.
Yep, I think so as well. Being able to have these guys stay in school, I think is just such a big thing. And I do like to see that, as we do have our good friend Nate Hornung, aka Shaggy Betts, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And in terms of the teams, in terms of the NBA draft decisions, is there one or two in particular that you're just feeling super bullish about them? Because I think that with Duke, they bring back Caleb Foster, Dame Sarr, well, along with their recruiting class. I think they're going to be back in there in the top five. I think Florida's going to be back in there in the top five. I don't know if Arizona quite gets to the top five, but if they're not in the top five, they're going to be really darn close. And I know that there's still a little bit of speculation that one or two of their guys in the draft might come back as well. And I think that those teams were big winners. And is there any others that you'd like to throw in there that maybe are a little bit more under the radar, but you feel like they were big winners from this past week or two?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely mentioned Florida. They are definitely on my radar to be one of the best teams in the country again. And, I got to give some flowers to the Louisville Cardinals and what Pat Kelsey is doing, getting Flory Badunga from KU, getting Jackson Shelstead from Oregon. Shelstead maybe not having the best year this year, obviously, with that injury, but still a fantastic player. And I think he's going to fit Pat Kelsey's system very, very well. So I'm excited to watch Louisville and see how they do in the ACC. Obviously, you still got to take down Duke, and they might be throwing out a little platoon system the next season with all of their recruits and returnees. But I got some faith in the Louisville Cardinals to make some noise this upcoming season.
Yep, I do as well. I think that they're going to be very rock solid moving forward, and I like what I've seen out of them here in the offseason. They've been some of the big winners, and I think that's really interesting because we've had a lot of the big names come off the board. We've seen a lot of the NBA draft decisions come down, and I know that there's a lot of people that are fans of Big Blue Nation that are like, oh, you're being too harsh to our team and everything like that, but how do you take a look at a few of these teams that it just feels like it's underwhelming? Because with Kentucky, they lose out on Tyran Stokes. It felt like that was one of their main recruits. And I mean, at the very least, in their own conference, they are doing much better than LSU, which I don't know what's happening there because their entire roster is Mohamed Diabate.
Right. No, Kentucky absolutely needs to make some moves. You said it. And, shout out to my own Kansas Jayhawks for getting Stokes. That was a big get for Bill Self, pairing up with McKinney as kind of the 1-2 punch coming in that freshman class. But you said it. I mean, Kentucky is not really moving the needle at all for me. You got Zoom Diallo. I think he's going to be a great player as well. But you've got every single guy jumping ship. Denzel Aberdeen going back to Florida. Colin Chandler out to BYU. Brandon Garrison staying in the SEC, going to Alabama. The opposite of what Mohamed Diabate did last season. So I worry for Mark Pope. I worry for Big Blue Nation, and I think it could be another very character-building season for Kentucky going forward because they just don't have the players that you're used to at a blue-blooded program like that. So I'm with you. I'm very down on Kentucky this year. Interested to see kind of how they turn things around with whatever roster Mark Pope gets together.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I do think that for Kentucky, just not really feeling it. I don't know how Zoom Diallo and Alex Wilkins play off of one another. I don't think it's the world's worst roster, but man, I was expecting a little bit more out of them. So that's a team that I very much highlight. And I still wonder, like with the SEC, it feels like it's been boom or bust because with Florida, I absolutely love what they've been able to do. I think they're having a nice offseason. Tennessee, I'm thinking that they have a great offseason as well. And for Texas A&M, I think that a lot of people are going to declare them winners, but still, I don't know if PJ Haggerty fits that system. They and Vanderbilt are teams that I feel like there's a lot of people are bullish on them. With Vanderbilt, it just feels like they're not going to be the same team that they were a season ago with their backcourt. And for Texas A&M, while PJ Haggerty is a big piece for them, I just don't know if the system of just being holes greater than the sum of its parts, having like 9 or 10 rotating guys, is going to be able to work out because you do have a guy in PJ Haggerty that I wish I could put it any other way is pretty much a ball hog.
Yeah, no, you absolutely said it. And I mean, those are my thoughts exactly. PJ Haggerty, a stud, a great basketball player, no doubt about it, but he needs the ball in his hands. He needs so many shots per game just to find his rhythm and get going, and he just demands the ball. And I'm with you. That's not necessarily Bucky McMillan's system. He likes to get everybody involved. He likes to really play team basketball. So I'm a little concerned with how PJ Haggerty's going to fit in there in that system. As for another team in the SEC, actually another team in the Lone Star State, the Texas Longhorns, I have definitely liked what they've done this offseason. Getting Elijah Freeman from Auburn, getting Amari Evans, the big one in David Punch and Isaiah Johnson as well. I really think Sean Miller has got himself a good roster. You know, they've got a lot to go off of with the momentum they built at the end of last season, going all the way from the first four to the Sweet 16. And now Miller's kind of reloaded and got a bunch of guys ready to play some basketball this upcoming season. So I'll be pretty high on Texas going into this next season of college basketball.
Oh, I'm right there with you. I'm very bullish on this Texas Longhorns team myself. I think that they're going to be in for a really nice season. They were able to shock a lot of people in the NCAA tournament last year, so been very hit or miss out there in the SEC thus far. And then when I just take a look conference by conference, I'm also really impressed by what I've seen in the bottom of the ACC as well. Syracuse very much looks revamped this season. Boston College has actually signed guys. Like, Boston College spending money in college basketball. Way to get with the program, guys. So love that, even though it's 100 million billion guys. Pittsburgh, they've decided that they're bringing in some guys. They're clearly looking to be able to get back on track. I feel like the bottom of the ACC is going to be a little bit better this year. Still have some question marks with the conference as a whole, but feels like the last two off seasons, they've taken steps in the right directions.
Yeah, I would hope so, because, college hoops is just better when the ACC is a good conference top to bottom, which it has been in the past, but not necessarily these past few seasons. So I'm right there with you on Syracuse. I think Syracuse obviously is just kind of a big brand of college basketball, so the whole sport benefits when that team specifically is much better. I'm also looking at North Carolina, who Mike Malone has brought in, and I was really worried about his recruiting, to be quite honest with you, but he's got some big name guys already, a couple of 4-star recruits in the portal. So I think the Tar Heels, they certainly have the talent to be back towards the top of the ACC. Whether they can put it all together in the postseason and make a run at the national title, that might take a couple years for Malone to get back into the college game. But I've got some hope for North Carolina going into this season as well, but definitely high on Syracuse, like you said.
Yep, no question about it. And we do have to go back to this as well, because I feel like I buried it when we were talking about the struggles of Kentucky. But I know you're a man that you do like the Kansas Jayhawks. They do sign Tyran Stokes. How do you look at this Kansas team right now in the overall offseason? Because had they not gotten Stokes, I think that it would be fair to say that it would have been a complete and utter failure. That would have been not great, to say the least. But I still feel like Kansas might need a little bit of depth. And other than Stokes, I've been a little bit underwhelmed by some of their pickups here in the offseason.
You are preaching to the choir, man. I have not been impressed what they've done this offseason in the portal wise. Obviously, with McKinney and getting Stokes, that's huge for the program, but you lose Flory, you lose Bryson Tiller, even guys like Jamari McDowell and Elmarco Jackson, who might have been up for bigger roles this upcoming season, are jumping ship. But I do have a little faith in them. Maybe it's a little delusional faith in my own Kansas Jayhawks, but I do like the signing of Keanu Dawes from Utah. I think he's going to be a staple part of Bill Self's offense. Obviously, getting the 7-footer Christian Reeves from Charleston as well, has some Power 5 experience playing at Clemson and Duke previously to his stop in Charleston. And then the Toledo guard, Leroy Blyden. I think he's really going to fit well in Bill Self's system, kind of a true pass-first point guard who's able to go and get his buckets when he needs to. But I think he'd do a great job off the bench of, controlling the offense, creating opportunities for his teammates. But obviously, all eyes are going to be on Stokes as that number 1 overall recruit, which we had that last season with Darren Peterson. And we all know that didn't really work out how we thought it was going to be. But I would say I've still got a little, probably a little too much delusional faith in the Kansas Jayhawks this offseason, despite Bill Self not really hitting the portal like he needs to.
Yeah, I do think that they need a little bit more down low myself, but the fact that they were able to get Stokes, that was a really good step in the right direction. So we're going to see what is going to be happening this offseason with them. And is there just a team or two this offseason that maybe they're flying a little bit on the radar? Because I feel like we know what Louisville has done. I feel like we know what Florida, Michigan, and company have done. But is there a team or two that you've just been impressed by the moves that they've been able to make thus far, and maybe they're not getting talked about the way that you feel like they should?
Actually, one of those teams is the Indiana Hoosiers. And maybe there has been some buzz around them a little bit, but, getting Marcus Burton from Notre Dame, a pure scorer, I think is going to really help that Indiana roster, as well as bringing in Aiden Sherrill from Alabama. Two guys that go and get buckets when you need them to, and Sherrill definitely helping them out down low. They got the big 7-footer from SMU as well. I'm going to try and not butcher his name, but Samet, big old 7-footer from SMU, obviously going to help their big front court as well. So I really like what what DeVries has been doing this offseason, revamping that Indiana Hoosiers roster after not quite living up to expectations last season. I think Indiana could definitely make a run at the tournament, and they really should, considering it's going to be 76 teams next season.
Yeah, if they don't make the 76-team NCAA tournament, then we really do have some issues. Heck, it was an issue that they didn't make the 68-team tournament this past year, considering they were in great position prior to the last few weeks of the season. Then they lose to Northwestern a few times, and that was not great to say the least. But what is great is getting you aboard, as I know that you, Nate, are doing a great job on so many different fronts, looking at college basketball. I know you're getting set for the World Cup as well. Don't sleep on that. That's coming up in the next few weeks, and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yep, absolutely. You can get my written work every single day at bettingnews.com. I also host streams on the Betting News Network every Monday through Friday at noon Eastern, the morning spread, and then follow along on all social media at Shaggy_bets.
Absolutely. And Nate, he's doing such a great job looking at the sport of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. He did so once again today. So a big thanks to Nate for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the Decent Family podcast. Coming next, it is that time of the podcast to give you a recap of the news and what we saw in college basketball the last 24 hours. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family podcast. It is always a pleasure to be joined by our man, Shaggy Betts, a.k.a. Nate Hornung. He does such great work looking at this sport of college basketball. Every single time he joins me, he lends such great insights. Did so once again today. So a big thanks to Nate for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast to give you a recap of the news and notes that we saw in college basketball over the last 24 hours. We recap the fact that Duke got another nice add, and Olivier Roux, the 7'9" big man, he is heading on over to UC Irvine. So good on them. But we did see Damian Wilkerson decide that he is moving away from South Dakota State last year. 14 points, 6.5 boards. Not a guy that popped it from three, but a guy that at 6'10" was able to be a nice force for them down low, and he has landed on going to Nebraska. A nice ad for Nebraska, who I feel like has had a solid offseason thus far. For Nebraska, I don't know if they're going to be back to where they were a season ago, because you do lose a guy like a Rink Mass, so they've been really trying to add some bigs here to be able to fill in for that. This is the latest of them. You also bring in Sam Orme, 6'9", little bit of a combo player from Belmont. Bowden Kepke, he was over at Boston College. He's able to pop some threes. Trayvon Leonard coming over from Utah Valley. This is going to be a really good defensive team. I think this could be a team that struggles a little bit on offense, but a team with a lot of size. I think that Nebraska is going to be a mainstay here in the Big Ten for quite a while. They've certainly gone in hard on the college basketball front, so absolutely love to see that. And then Oregon has been having themselves a really nice offseason, and they pick up on Thursday a guy that I think has a lot of upside, Dwayne Aristote. He over at Arizona didn't necessarily see the world's greatest amount of minutes or anything like that. He was averaging about 3.8 or so points per contest, but a guy that has a lot of versatility at 6'8". Many had him as a top 35 recruit in the 2025 recruiting class. He was able to shoot 46% from three-point range on a relatively small sample size. As we know, Arizona wasn't necessarily a team that was popping it and locking it from three-point range, but absolutely love what I've seen out of Oregon this offseason. The last few offseasons, their transfer classes have left something to be desired. Not so much here. Andrew Meadow is a solid double-figure scorer from Boise State. Tyrone Riley was solid over at San Francisco. Jasper Johnson, a former top 50 recruit, felt like he got better as the season went along over at Kentucky. Jerry Easter, he's a guy that at 6'5", he was able to do a little bit of handling over at USC. Have to think that you're trusting in Jasper Johnson a little bit more at the point guard spot, but Taylor Bowen, he's 6'10", he's able to give you some blocks. He, if needed, can pop it and lock it from three-point range coming over from Alabama. So overall, I look at this offseason thus far, and it has been a good one for a program that was very much embarrassed last season, and they need to try to get back to prominence. They're doing a good job in terms of doing so. Nde Okafor, he has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Mississippi State. He flipped Mississippi schools. He was supposed to be going to Ole Miss at first. Now he's heading on over to Mississippi State, one of the few wins that they've had in quite some time, because for Mississippi State, things have been rough for them, to say the least. And under Chris Jans, they have never been inside the top 250 in terms of three-point shooting percentage. They are bringing back Joshua Hubbard from a season ago. That's really the biggest add there. He was averaging 22 points per game for the team, so being able to retain him, I thought, was absolutely massive. RJ Johnson was a nice point guard over at Kennesaw State, and he had to take over a tumultuous situation with Simeon Cottle getting suspended, so I like him. Kendall Sanders, he comes over from Utah, 6'8", little bit of a do-it-all player. Thomas Besong, didn't necessarily see a lot of minutes over at Florida, but I mean, he's okay. And then with Okafor, where he's a guy that's going to be able to give you a little bit of rebounding. He should be able to help out with regards to just being able to jam up the post as well. 11 points, 5.5 boards. Not a guy that's going to give you any sort of three-point shooting at 6'9", but the overall interior defense seems like it's coming back for Mississippi State. That's when they truly have been at their best under Chris Jans, so do like that. And then you do have to like the fact that Davion Hanna, he was over at Alabama last year. He's heading on over to South Carolina. Now, he wasn't necessarily seeing a ton of minutes or anything like that, about 3.5 points, 2 rebounds per game, but for South Carolina, they've had themselves a really nice offseason, in my opinion. Hanna did shoot 36.5% from 3. Many revered him as a top 50 recruit in last year's class, and for South Carolina, it does appear as though they're a little bit more all-in on this program. Lamont Paris just has not had a lot to work with in general over the last few seasons. Unfortunately, they're without Michi Johnson after he had about 500 years of eligibility, but that said, you had a double-figure score in Shane Blakeney. Alexis Bilisikis, he comes over from Wisconsin, ironically enough, for Hanna, he was originally playing his high school basketball in Wisconsin. Lamont Paris has some connections out there, so that's been helping them out. Corey Mincy, double-figure scorer from George Mason. Cameron Idy, nice three-point shooter from Texas, so love what these guys are doing. David Douglas Jr., he began his college basketball career out there in the Midwest, actually began at UW Green Bay, and he missed a year, I believe it was 2 years ago. Last year, when he was over at Fresno State, he was able to pop it at about 39.5% from 3. 7.5 points per game, was limited due to injury when he was at UW Green Bay, by the way. 37% three-point shooter, 8.5 points per game. He is back in the Midwest. He is heading on over to Northern Illinois. It has been a rough last few seasons for Northern Illinois, to say the least. So this is an ad that, quite frankly, they really, really needed. Northern Illinois, I wouldn't say that they're doing an amazing job in the transfer portal. They're not doing an awful job, but I mean, even a satisfactory job is better than where it's been in the past. You've got Ozai Butin. He was able to give you some nice production over at South Dakota last year. Jack Daughtry, he was a nice defensive stopper over at Illinois State, a guy that at 6'7" should be able to help this team out on glass. So for Northern Illinois, are they going to be towards the bottom of the MAC? Most likely, but I do like some of the ads that they've had. So at the very least, they're getting a little bit closer to, shall we say, respectability, and that's all you can ask at this point, because, man, it's been a bit rough for them over the last few seasons. This is a great name. Buddy Hammer. He was over at North Texas and Mean Green, and it's actually Buddy Hammer Jr. Like, that sounds like a great name for, shall we say, adult film. I will say that, and we will not go any further, but that would be a great name for something like that. It could be a great name for other things as well, but he was over at North Texas last year. He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Akron, and hey, the Hammer was able to do a little bit of something last year. He was averaging about 4 points, 3 rebounds per game, 6'7" combo player, shot about 31.5% from 3. Didn't take a lot of threes, but for Akron, they're losing John Gross, but they hired from within, so they don't lose their entire roster from the season ago, and they've done a nice job of rebuilding. Max Burton, he's a 6'10" big man coming over from Western Michigan. Ty Pence was a nice player over at Illinois State this last season. Taj Shavetsky, he could come in there and run the point right away. Colin White was over at Ohio State. Xavier Wilson, neither guy saw a lot of minutes at the power conference level, with Wilson coming over from Kansas State, but nice gambles to be able to take. So Akron doing a solid job here in the offseason, and they get the hammer in this one. Alexa Vucevic, he was over at Buffalo this last season. He's decided that he's going to Indiana State. Indiana State, you may recall it a ad on the podcast yesterday as well, and Kamani Gregory, double-figure score over at USC Upstate, and it's clear that Indiana State is looking to do a better job of, for one, taking care of the ball, and two, playing defense, because last year they were just absolutely atrocious on the defensive side of things. But I do like this ad for them. They already had Joe Chappelle, who's able to give you some size. Now you've got, in my opinion, a guy that is going to be a little bit of a project. He comes over after he just wasn't able to see any playing time over there at Buffalo, but he was playing a little bit over at Serbia to begin his life. He moved to the United States, I think that a little bit of a younger age, but still a guy that at 6'10", probably not going to be a versatile big man, but at the same time, he's going to be all help out down low. For an Indiana State team that was really good in terms of their two-point shooting offense, they need to add a little bit more three-point shooting, and they've done so here in the portal. I really think that McGuire Mitchell coming over from IUND is going to be able to help out as well. You've got Michi White, who's able to generate turnovers from Eastern Illinois, so they did a nice job in terms of addressing a lot of their, shall we say, shortcomings from the season ago. So Indiana State doing a nice job in terms of getting online. This program is trying to be able to get online as well, and they added on Thursday a pretty good player in Benil Basil. He was over at Wagner last season, and he's heading on over to Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi hasn't had a lot of ads here in the transfer portal thus far. Corpus Christi is just always that team that's right around about third or fourth in the Southland. They're good for about like 18 to 20 20 wins, rock solid program. They're built around defense. They haven't added a lot of guys here in the portal, but the other guy that they had, Jordan Mazzell, he was able to see solid minutes over at Tarleton State, running a bit of point for them, was able to generate some turnovers. It's clear that they're looking to continue that rough and tumble style. Wagner was always known for that. At 6'7" last season, 9 points, 6 boards, shot about 31.5% from three-point range over at Wagner. Wasn't a part of a defense that really generated a ton of turnovers or anything like that, but he should be able to help out this team down low for Texas A&M. Corpus Christi a little bit weak on the defensive glass this last season. He's going to help fill in there. He should be able to fit this program very well, so I love that. You got Trey Brown, who was over at Maryland Eastern Shore last season. He's going to be staying within the MEAC. He heads on over to NC Central. NC Central has some of the deepest pockets of the teams out there in the MEAC. Not really saying a whole heck of a lot. I'll call it what it is. And you saw the just draw of Lavelle Moten. He was the AAU coach of John Wall back in the day, but for Brown last season, about 3.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game over at Maryland Eastern Shore. Maryland Eastern Shore was a solid defensive team last year. They had absolutely no offense whatsoever. And for NC Central, they just got absolutely cooked down low last season, so he should be able to come in there and help them. For NC Central, they've been mostly adding non-Division I guys thus far. This is their first Division I ad, so we're going to need to see them be able to add a little bit more, but good first step for them. For Wofford, they had Chris Arias. He last season was playing over at Jacksonville. Jacksonville was a whole scarier than some of its parts team, but Arias was one of their better players. 7.5 points, shot 36% from three-point range, 6'6", good versatility. Jacksonville wasn't the world's worst defensive team last season, not quite where some of the Jacksonville teams have been in the past, but that was really the shortcoming of Wofford, and gonna call it what it is, much of the SoCon in general. But he goes on over to a Wofford program that I felt like they were shockingly good last season, considering the situation. This is really their first ad in the transfer portal among D1 transfers. They've added a few non-Division I guys as well, and they've been able to retain quite a bit of that roster from a season ago, which you don't find too much in the SoCon. Obviously, you lose some of your top guys from a season ago, but still, they're going to be bringing back some of those ancillary guys. So Coach Gildner, he's been able to do a solid job thus far, and this is a good piece at his disposal. BB Knight, he was over at Lamar. He has decided that he is going to be going to UT Rio Grande Valley. Grand Valley trying to make the most out of a little bit of a rough situation. You lose your coach in the offseason, and he has poached quite a bit of that roster, but that's up for UT Rio Grande Valley. It does feel like they've been able to do a solid job in terms of making some lemonade out of the lemons that they have been handed thus far. As for Grand Valley, they added Jeffeth Martinez. He was over at USC Upstate. He should be able to give them a little bit down low. Devin Pryor is a guy that they added earlier in the week as well. 6'7", little bit of a combo player. He comes on over from Oregon. He should be able to help this team's floor out quite a bit. And for BB Knight, he missed darn near a full season due to injury when he was over at Lamar, but still, this is a guy that's going to be able to give you quite a bit. When he was over at Lamar, it was a team that was playing at a very slow, controlled style, but typically they were a pretty rock-solid team on the defensive side of things. For Knight at 6'6", he's a little bit of a combo player that last year was relatively glued to the bench, 2.5 points per game. You go back to his strongest season, 2023, 2024. That year he was hitting 37% of his threes, 10.5 points per game. Got injured during the 2024-25 season, couldn't find his bearings last season. Now UT Rio Grande Valley sort of kicking the tires, seeing what they've got because they've already seen him up close and in person. Dejon Brown is also staying within the conference. He comes over from McNeese, so I do think that this has been a solid offseason thus far for Grand Valley given the circumstances, and that's a good ad for them. Another man from Jacksonville decided where he was going to be going. Tito Dang, that's a great name. He was over at Jacksonville last season as a big man. He has decided that he is going to be adding on over to Charleston Southern. For Charleston Southern, they do have to pick up quite a few of the pieces that they lost in the offseason, and for Dang, he was a guy that redshirted last season, began his life over at South Sudan, came on over and played a little bit of prep ball in the state of Georgia. Very much a developmental guy. He stands 6'11", but he weighs less than 200 pounds, so he's not necessarily the strongest guy. He wasn't necessarily too much of a shot blocker, but for Charleston Southern, this was a group that they were able to actually play some relatively solid defense. The one thing with them is that they generated 0 turnovers whatsoever. Like, they did a good job guarding the three-point line. They didn't allow too many good looks down low, but they just could not generate a turnover to save their lives, so they need to address that. They've already brought in Asmin Madine, who was over at UNC Greensboro this last season, and Nicolas Arica, he was over at Western Michigan, so they haven't added too much sizzle thus far. We'll see if that move is going to be coming here in the coming days and coming weeks. For Georgetown, they had a man from Florida Atlantic in Josiah Parker. It's been a little bit slow going here for Georgetown, but they're starting to be able to put together, I would say, a respectable roster. I don't know if this team is going to be getting back to the NCAA tournament even with expansion, but that said, I do think that he's going to be able to step in right away, be able to give this team a bit of something as they brought in Jalen Lowe. If he's able to be fully healthy, I think that that's a key for this team. Was a double-figure scorer over at Pittsburgh 2 seasons ago. Marco Jackson just never really found his role over at Kansas, but he's an upside guy. You've got Joel Macho, who was last season over at Charleston. He was averaging 2+ blocks per contest. Again, he's going to be stepping up a level, but I think that that's going to be translating in for Parker last year. 9.5 points, 6 boards. I don't think that he's going to be much more than a depth piece for this team, but Georgetown didn't have a lot of depth last season, so that is going to be very helpful for them. The long and winding road for Rodney Brown continues. He was over at Loyola Marymount last season, and he has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Seton Hall. For Seton Hall, they absolutely needed to address the fact that they were not a good three-point shooting team last year, and this man is going to be able to help them do so. I remember a few seasons ago over at Virginia Tech, he was rock solid there for Loyola Marymount. He was able to put in their 14 points, shot 38.5% from 3 after a season ago. Over at Virginia Tech, shot more like 42% from 3 on a little bit lower volume, 14 points per game. Not a guy that's really going to distribute a whole heck of a lot, but this is going to very much fit in with Seton Hall. And I mean, it was a bunch in Loyola Marymount that was a pretty solid defensive team, especially down low. So I think that he's going to be able to fit in with that Seton Hall defense. They're going to need to coach him up a little bit, but with bringing in Rodney Anderson from Xavier, Del Jones was a nice double-figure scorer over at Radford. Kareem Thomas was able to fill it up for Dartmouth. I think that we have seen Shaheen Holloway look himself in the mirror and know that he's got a good defensive philosophy, just needs to add in there some shooters. They certainly have been adding in there a lot of shooting here in the offseason. Great Scott, James Scott, he was over at Ole Miss. He's decided that he's going to be heading on over to Georgia, and for Georgia, it's been very slow going here in the portal. I don't know what realistic expectations are for this team at this point because they just needed to add a little bit more. And for Scott, he was relatively solid this last season. He was averaging about 4.5 rebounds per game for an Ole Miss team that was allergic to rebounding. In my opinion, they just didn't use him right. Like, you go back 2 years ago for a Louisville team that made the NCAA tournament, 7 points, 6 boards, nearly a block per contest at 6'11". He's not going to go out there and pop it from 3, but when you do lose Samato Surreal from a season ago, you need to be able to replace that with something. Is he going to be that? No, but he helps out down low. You've also got Brady Dunlap coming on over from St. Louis, 6'7" combo player. Freddie De Leon was a solid scorer over at Penn State and began his career over at Tennessee, but they needed that rim protector. They do get that. Is it a downgrade from last year? Yes, but still, in my opinion, a pretty solid ad, especially considering the pickings getting a little bit more slim here in the transfer portal. Luca Sora-Schuyler, hopefully I got that correct. He was over at Northeastern this last year. He is heading on over to the bracket busting Bucknell Bison. Now, for Bucknell, it's a program that is really looking to be able to get back to former glory. They haven't made the NCAA tournament in darn near a decade, and you've got a guy in Coach Griffin who was a part of the Bucknell team that was able to knock off Kansas in the NCAA tournament many years ago. And for Bucknell, losing Amon Doris is rough, but this is a little bit more of an international man of mystery because this guy did not really see a lot of minutes. I'm saying this guy because he has 3 different names, so it makes it a little bit more difficult there, but still, he's a guy that he's got a little bit of experience with that regard, and I do think that this is going to be a relatively good, shall we say, upside ad for Bucknell because with Sora, he was able to, as a 6'6" combo player this last year over at Northeastern, give you about 5.5 points, 3.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game. Needs to work on that 3-point shot. He shot 22.6% from 3-point range, but step in the right direction for Bucknell, a team that was very much marred by injuries last season, and this is really their first transfer. It's hard to be able to land guys in the Patriot League, so getting an ad like this is going to be able to help them out, and we'll see if that versatility is able to play here with the bracket busting Bison. You have Eric Chatfield. He was over at Georgia Tech last season. He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Bryant. Obviously, for Bryant, it was a little bit of a rough season, number 1 for them under Jamion Christian, but I'm a believer in him as a coach. I remember he did great things when he was over at Mount St. Mary's many years ago for Chatfield. He was averaging about 2.5 points, was able to give out 1.5 assists per game for Georgia Tech this last season on about 13 minutes per game. He was a little bit limited due to injury, so that hurt them a little bit, but Bryant really had no point guard last year. They had very little guard play whatsoever, so this is a step in the right direction for them. They already bring in their Andre Pasha, who was a double-figure scorer at 6'9" from New Haven. Onyx Nanani, He was at South Florida, a 6'9" guy that didn't see a lot of minutes there, but should be able to give this team a bit more on the glass. Feels like Bryant is starting to build themselves up. They're going to need to get some three-point shooting. Right now, they have absolutely none on the roster whatsoever, but this is certainly helpful, so you do like to see that. Lewis Bond, he was playing over at Idaho State this last year. He has decided that he is going to be heading on over to Northeastern. Again, with Northeastern, I do really feel like even though Coach Bill Cohen has been able to do a lot of great things over the years, the game has just really passed him by. The team wasn't good on offense. The team wasn't really good on defense this last season, and for Northeastern, they've only made a few select moves thus far, so they still need to get a little bit of a move on in general. Is this a step in the right direction? Sure it is, but this wasn't a guy that was lighting the world on fire last season. 5 points per game, shot 35.5% from 3-point as a 6'5" combo player. Now, he was part of a program that played very slow and controlled, but Idaho State took a massive step back on defense last season. They also have Braden Young coming on over from Loyola Chicago, a little bit of an upside guy there. Dorian Grosper, he was over at High Point, but he didn't see a lot of minutes there. Bond is pretty much the only guy out of the 3 transfers that they've added that saw meaningful minutes, and it's not like they were overly massive. So Northeastern feels like they are not keeping up with the Joneses out there in the CAA, but at the very least, they do get on the board on Thursday. Canisius, they get on the board. Priest Ryan, he was over at Cleveland State last season. He has decided that he is going to be becoming a Golden Griffin. For Canisius, obviously a tumultuous last few seasons in general, but I like this ad for them. 7 points, 4 boards, 6'6" combo player, shot about 30% from 3 last season. Began his career over at Coppin State. He missed the entirety of the 2024-25 season coming back from injury, so this was a solid start for him. Not a guy that's going to do one thing great, but he's going to do everything relatively solid, and for Canisius, they just need a little bit of everything. Right now, they bring in Michael Wilson, who is a nice scorer over at Bellarmine, Vinny Sungana, who is a good 3-point shooter over at East Texas A&M, so they've been able to add a little bit more there. He should be able to give you a little bit of rebounding. Nate Fouts was a solid player at Lemoyne, so Canisius looks like they're going to be much more respectable this year. Are they going to be back in the upper half of the Metro Atlantic? I don't think so, but they're certainly taking some steps in the right direction. Joan Munich, he was over at Oregon State this last season. He has decided that he is going to be going to SMU. Now, if this is anything more than a depth piece for SMU, then they have gotten this one wrong. Like, Munch last year was solid. He comes over from the country of Denmark at 6'11", 8 points, 5 rebounds per game, and with losing Samat Yedoglu, I always say that last name incorrectly, but the gentleman that was a 7+ footer from Turkey, SMU, they certainly needed to be able to fill that hole because they've done a good job with the backcourt. You bring in Rowan Brumba, he's a guy that is going to be able to give you some instant scoring, and now he doesn't even need to bring up the ball anymore because you bring over David Terrell from North Texas. He should be able to instantly help this team out on defense. You bring in Jalen Stewart and Nick Kodai, who was over at Texas this last season, but they're still going to need to do a little bit more down low because for Munch, he's able to give you a few rebounds. I just don't know if he's necessarily fit for playing at the ACC level, so you do have a few question marks there, but at the very least, they do have a little bit more size on the board, and you've got John Broome, no relation to G&I Broome from many years ago over at Auburn. He has decided that he is going to be going to Vermont. This is a great get for Vermont. Vermont is a team that generated no turnovers whatsoever over the last few seasons. Broome was a part of a slow and controlled team that was very, very good over at South Alabama this last season. For Broome, wasn't too much of a scorer. His best year came 2 years ago. 2 years ago, 2024-25 season, 5.3 points, 5.7 boards, steal and half per contest, shot 38% from 3, was reduced to more of an ancillary role this year. He went from being a starter to coming in off the bench, more around 2.5 points, 3 rebounds per game, but at 6'5", he's able to give you some 3-point shooting. He's got active hands. He's a part of a team that was playing a little bit more slowly this past season, so I think that this is a really good fit for them, and hopefully this podcast is a good fit for you. We're taking a look at all that we're getting in college basketball right now, and if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, literacy on the media does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks once again to Nate Hornung, aka Shaggy Betts, for joining me in the last segment, coming at you guys every single day with the recap of all that we're seeing here in the college basketball offseason. Here in the offseason, once we get back in season, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So appreciate you tuning in today. I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.